afternoon, as you know, we're having our speaker, Ben, here. And isn't it coincidental that we win an award for being super people when it comes to this kind of thing? And then we have Ben, who's going to put that cherry on that cake, which is going to be really cool. Now, what I'm going to say to you all is we're a smaller group today, because I think AGM put people off a little bit. So on that basis, can you make sure you say hello to as many people as possible? Because we do have people who come along and say, nobody talks to me, nobody says hello. And that's not good enough, is it? So we should definitely say hello to one another. And we've actually got an excuse now to laugh at each other a little bit, I think. Is that going to happen, isn't it? A little bit?
Quite possibly.
Possibly, yeah. But what we're going to find is there's no pressure to do anything that Ben describes unless you want to. And if you want to come on the stage with him, you can do that. You're not going to do that, are you?
I can take some volunteers.
Oh, my golly. Okay. Well, that's going to be interesting to watch. But in the meantime, may I pass over to you, sir?
Okay, right. So I don't normally stand up on the stage because I feel peculiar being elevated from everyone, but I've been asked specifically to stand on the stage, so I hope you don't mind. All good. Right, well, congratulations, first of all, on your fitness award. So it seems that the majority of you really don't need me at all. You're all well and fit already. But I guess we can, fine-tune that even further and become the best possible athletes by the end of today. So I'm not sure with the lower numbers of people if they were deterred by the AGM or by me, but we'll never know. So, how many of you were aware that you're going to a fitness talk, with a show of hands? Okay, the majority of you. So that's quite positively surprising, actually, that you knew that and had come regardless. So I trust you've all got your headbands, plimsolls and water bottles ready. Okay, so we will do a little bit of exercise. It's not just me talking. I try and make it a bit interactive as well. So it will all be chair-based. Of course, you only join in with the bits that you're comfortable with. There's no pressure to do anything that you don't want to. So, thank you for having me. My name is Ben. I'm a personal trainer and I specialise in working with the over 50s age group. So I've kind of fallen into that niche over time for various reasons, partly because it was a natural progression in my work, but I also found I particularly enjoyed working with that age group because I learned lots from them as well. So it's a very mutual relationship. And of course, they benefit in ways from exercise that young people don't. So it has more of an influence on their functionality, I find. It might improve their ability to perform daily tasks. I recently had a client who started coming to my class and with a walking stick, and about maybe a month or two later, and I know this sounds like a miracle, but she turned up without the stick and said, I don't need this anymore, Ben, the exercises are good, now I don't need my stick. So that sort of thing really fuels me and inspires me, and that's maybe a good explanation for why I've focused on the area that I have. So what it kind of means in practical terms, as opposed to working with general populations, is more of a focus on functionality, and you'll hear that word a lot today, you might get bored of it, but that essentially relates to our ability to go about our daily life. So it's a bit of a technical term for quite a simple concept, but that's our ability to stand up from a chair, to walk up the stairs, everything that we need to live our life independently, essentially. And the other maybe point of distinction is that I'm working with my clients in a lot of cases to offset areas of decline, or even to reverse areas of decline. And that sounds like a scary term, but that relates just to things like loss of muscle tissue, loss of strength, and those are things that just occur inevitably through our adult life, often from the age of 30 or 40. So there's nothing to be afraid of necessarily, and it's something that actually we have agency over and can improve with exercise. So that's what I found in my work, and that's what I try and help my clients with. So how many of you, I'm interested, are exercising 3 times per week in a structured way? So gardening counts, walking to the shops doesn't. Brilliant. So lots of, basically most of you, which is fantastic. And if any of you are brave enough, I'm interested in just a single adjective that you immediately associate with the word exercise. So if you pop up a hand, we'll do 1 or 2. I'm trusting that some of you will be brave enough. 1 at the back. Health, that's brilliant, that's a good one.
Enjoyment.
Enjoyment, super.
Essential.
Essential. I'll tell you something. 1 more there, Mr. McKean.
Fame.
Pain. Oh, okay, interesting. I was going to say, when I do that at other groups, it's words like boring, mundane, laborious, things of that nature, normally quite negative adjectives, whereas there's something in the water here because you're all, optimistic and eager to exercise, which is great. So something about ambition, maybe. So the talk will cover a little bit about who I am, what I do, but mainly I want to give some practical tips. And I'm only doing half an hour today, so it'll be a little bit more kind of efficient. Some of you may feel that the talk isn't as relevant to you as you are all uber fit, and also some of you may not be in the age demographic that I work with either. There's a couple of reasons I'd say why it applies to everyone. One of those is that there are things we can do much earlier in life than what I call preventative. So that's essentially things like doing strength training, building up muscle tissue, so that when you start to lose it, you've got more in reserves. You're kind of building a buffer. And I kind of think of that in terms of investing money or putting money in a piggy bank as an analogy. So I obviously go to the gym and I try to build up a certain amount of muscle tissue. That will serve me well when I get to maybe my dad's age and I start to lose it as he is, because I'll just have more there. So if I lose 50%, I've still got more than average, if that makes sense. So that's why it's important to exercise at any age and why this is all going to be relevant to us all. And additionally, we've all got friends and family that we can pass this on to. So even if it's parents or grandparents that may benefit from this and we're just going to be the kind of middleman and pass on that message, that can still be really useful, because these are bits of information that we want to spread around as much as possible and encourage each other, especially if we've got partners or parents or people in our life who are reluctant to exercise but really should, and that's quite common. So I thought we would start with some exercise, just a mobility session to get you kind of energized after the AGM, bring the heart rate up a little bit. This is going to be similar to what I would typically do for a warm-up in a class, just to mobilize all the joints, and it's a good example of something you could do every morning that would take all of 5 minutes. So we're going to start with the wrists, and I'm going to work all the way down. So you can start by circling the wrists. And the reason I've started at one end of the body to work down to the other is because it means I won't forget any bits. Not that my memory's that poor, but it's a helpful tip. You've also got to go the other way as well. That's fantastic. And then we'll loosen the fingers. So arthritis is quite common in the fingers, so it's important to loosen those and not to neglect those joints there. And then we'll go down to the elbow and just do a curl up and down like so. That's brilliant. And you want to stretch all the way down and lift all the way up. So you get a full range of motion, we called it. That's fantastic. And then if we go onto the shoulders and just roll gently, so we'll go backwards to start. And once you've done about 10, we'll go forwards. And of course, if any of these are painful or uncomfortable, you don't have to do them. We won't single anyone out. So we'll lift, maybe we'll lift forwards so we don't hit each other in the chin. So we'll lift forwards, and again, this is working your shoulders, just moving them in a slightly different way. So you can do a few exercises at each joint, especially with your shoulder, for example, because it's a ball and socket joint, so you can move it in all different directions. And then we'll go on to the neck. That's another area that might be neglected. So we'll go side to side gently, and you'll feel it stretching down the side of your neck. And then we'll twist side to side and loosen the back. So twisting your shoulders. That's brilliant. So that will loosen the back. We'll then lift the knees up as well. So you'll get the hips moving now. That's brilliant. Make sure you're sitting up nice and tall as well, so good posture if you can. That's great. And then we'll bend the knees like so. So you're going to kind of pull your ankles underneath the chair and forward again. And lastly, we'll go up on the toes like this. We'll do about 10 there. Okay, shake it off. Right, so that was about maybe 3 minutes, I'd say. And you've loosened all the joints in your body. And so that helps to keep them healthy and supple. And you can do that in the morning. It will help you feel a bit more energized. It releases endorphins, as we know. And so that's a really productive thing, like I say, to do every day if you can. So the title of the talk, which you may have seen on your newsletter or your magazine, is It's Never Too Late to Start. And that's a good starting point for understanding my general kind of message. That kind of encompasses it, because lots of my clients are starting exercise from scratch, and often at age 70 or 80, which may seem like an unconventional time to start fitness or the gym, but actually my message is that there's no better time, really. And actually, the older we are, the more we have to gain, and particularly if we are starting from scratch, because we've got so much potential that we haven't utilised. Whereas someone that's maybe been an athlete for their whole life, they probably don't have as much scope for progression and maybe wouldn't gain as much from it. So you shouldn't be discouraged, essentially, if you're a beginner. So I try and kind of band that kind of sentiment around of it's never too late to start, and I tell all of my clients that, and particularly in the groups at care homes and things, if they're kind of reluctant to join in, I'll say it's never too late to start, to try and kind of motivate them. And sometimes that works, sometimes they say, oh, could you put the TV back on, actually? But I try my best with people. So I normally do a little bit on my background, but I think I'll leave that because we've heard enough of me. The next bit is how I tailor my work. And of course, for you, this is how you can tailor your workouts. So you can apply this to your own lives. One of the things relates to functionality, which I mentioned earlier. And so I'll pick exercises with clients that reflect the demands of their life. So it will have transferability into their life. So I'm thinking about exercise in a very practical way. And I'll particularly focus on areas that they're struggling with. So if they're struggling with standing from a chair, for example, then I'll be doing lots of pressing movements with the legs that replicate that daily task to help them get to being able to stand up from a chair. And that's a really common, daily task that people start to struggle with, or they need to use their arms and need to assist themselves. So that's an example. And explaining the exercises in that way to my clients, I find really motivates them. So if you understand the kind of tangible benefit of the exercise you're doing and how it's going to help you directly, that helps to keep you on track and keep your your mojo, if you will. So I'll often say this will help you with reaching up on high shelves, this will help you walking up the stairs, this might help you washing your hair, etc. So additionally, I prioritise the legs and the back because those are areas that decline quicker than others. So you'll probably know lots of people who are well into their 80s who have still retained a lot of upper body strength. It tends to be in our kind of knees, legs, back, where we end up with more ailments, and those are the areas that become more vulnerable because it's where we lose more of our strength and our muscle tissue. So when I'm doing strength exercise with clients, I tend to do lots of squats, lots of leg extensions, rows for the back, and then maybe 10% of the workout will be arms and core, but it's not a priority. I'll also focus on muscular power. So that tends to decline quicker than our muscular endurance, which is the opposite of that. So endurance would be exerting like a low level of intensity, but continuously, whereas your power is to exert a high level of force. And that's something that we lose our ability to do over time. So I'll do lots of explosive movements with clients. I do lots of boxing as well, which, I mean, that's brilliant on lots of other levels as well, because it's skill-based and it's fun and people forget they're exercising when they're boxing. And I think if any of you haven't tried, you may be surprised with how much you do enjoy it. So that's another that's another area where I tailor my work for my audience. I'll give you one other example. You've got another two categories of strength. One being your dynamic strength, so your ability to lift a weight like this. And then you've got something called your isometric strength, which would be your ability to hold the weight there without moving and just do a static hold. And that's something that tends to decline over time. And that's why things like holding the shopping and other exercises become difficult. So I'll add pauses into exercises, and that's an easy thing to do with any exercise. If you're doing a curl like this, you would just stop 1, 2, and up, 1, 2, and up, etc. So you can implement that across the board with all of the exercises you're doing. That's a really good tip. Have any of you got any questions so far? Yeah, absolutely, go for it.
Where does flexibility come into your routine? That's also very important.
It is very important because we do lose elasticity in our muscles and our tendons over time. And so, you know, training our flexibility means that we maintain our range of motion at each joint. So we're not restricted in our movement. And that's also important for daily functioning, quality of life. I normally do stretches with clients at the end. So that's how I'll kind of structure it: warm up, main exercises, and the stretching will be part of the cool down. But that's absolutely another area worth focusing on, without a doubt. I'm just going to have a quick sip of water, and then I'm going to tell you an anecdote to inspire you all. So I had one client in particular who had been in hospital for a period because she was just unwell. But in being in the hospital and recovering and being sedentary during that period, her rate of decline with her strength and fitness had sped up, because there's a principle that we know, which is use it or lose it. And so if you're at the hospital and you're not doing your normal weekly activities or your walks or going to the shops, then of course that decline speeds up and you lose your ability to do things that you could previously. So she was doing a walk around the park every day quite comfortably, but having been in hospital for that period, then was struggling to walk at all really, and couldn't stand from a chair without being helped basically. So she'd ended up in a position where she needed some level of care, but it had been quite a quick decline. And lots of people noticed that as well, I found, during the lockdowns, where people's level of activity suddenly dropped. So I did lots of strength exercises with her, lots of leg exercises, and kind of built up her ability over time. And eventually she could walk to some extent and could stand from a chair without needing help. And so there's one occasion where I went and expected the carer to open the door, but she came and opened the door, and sort of as if it was normal. And that kind of shocked me, and was maybe one of my first experiences of seeing someone make a significant transformation in a way that really affected their life. And so that's a good example of, I suppose, the fact that you can really improve your situation, essentially, where I think there's maybe an idea that the best outcome is to maintain your current level of fitness, maybe beyond the age of 80. I kind of get that. I think there's that sentiment, I get the sense of that from people. And I used to feel that way as well. Just as an assumption, I just thought it's unlikely that you'd be able to gain strength in your 80s or 90s, but working with people each day has kind of proven to me that that's not the case, and that you can get stronger. And that's an example of that, I would say. So, strength for functionality. So, the decline in our functionality, I think, is largely attributed to a loss of strength. There's lots of other factors, but actually I think strength is a huge contributor, and lots of us don't necessarily realise that. And this makes sense because all the muscles in our body have a functional purpose. So, for example, we were doing curls earlier. So the bicep muscle is responsible for flexing our elbow and lifting our arm like this. So every time we pick something up, when we go to brush our teeth, have a glass of water, anything that involves kind of using our hands, we're relying on our bicep muscle in those situations. And so all of our muscles are helping us on a daily basis to do simple tasks. And so if our strength declines, then we lose those various functions essentially. So, for example, one of the things that that affects our functionality is our posture. So lots of people end up kind of hinging forward slowly and have what's called a kyphotic posture. I have lots of clients that say, Ben, I don't want to look like the people on this road sign, basically. So I try and help them with that. But that also comes down to strength in a lot of cases. There are different medical reasons why you might have a postural deviation. But for a lot of people who have just kind of gradually gone forward, it's just a loss of strength in various muscles in the back, which we call postural muscles. And lots of people actually, you may have had this with a grandparent or someone you know, where you say sit up and actually they can, but 5 minutes later you'll turn around and they're like this because they just don't have that muscular endurance to maintain that posture continuously. And so if they work those muscles and build up strength in their back, actually they'll redevelop their ability to hold a good posture. So that's an example of how strength is kind of indirectly affecting lots of different areas of our functionality. So I also wanted to mention that you don't necessarily have to use weights, you can use stretchy bands. I've got one of those with me to show you. Lots of you will have seen these at the physio or Pilates or other places. But the point is that strength, while being probably the area where you can get the most bang for your buck and where I'd really encourage you to, give it a go, it's also an area that people find intimidating, which is kind of also why I focus on it as well, because people aren't already doing it in their lives and don't necessarily have experience of it either, because lots of the sports and activities we've done through our life are more cardiovascular based, particularly things like team sports. So it can be unknown territory for people, but starting with a stretchy band maybe lowers the barrier to entry, maybe makes it a little bit less intimidating. You can also use some water bottles in your house if you don't want to buy a set of dumbbells straight away. So there's lots of different ways that you can approach it that don't necessarily have to feel, kind of highly intense. So to kind of back up my case further about strength before I go on to something different, I thought I'd cover some of the primary areas of decline, things that we all contend with, and how it can help. So, of course, if we do strength exercise, we build muscle tissue. So that reverses the process of muscle loss, which the technical term for that is sarcopenia. So it helps in that area. You've also got arthritis, which is another area that pretty much all of us will contend with at some point, some level of wear and tear in the joints. So strength can help in a couple of ways. One is that you are mobilizing the joints when you're doing strength exercise. So in the same way that we mobilized our joints earlier when we did the mobility workout, you're doing the same when you do a strength exercise. So if you're lifting above the head, for example, you're stretching the shoulder and you're moving it through a full range of motion. So you're mobilizing all of your joints as a kind of indirect benefit of lifting weights. And additionally, you're building muscle tissue around the joints. So you're providing support. You're building kind of a support network that protects your joints and makes them less vulnerable. So if you've got lots of muscle around your knee, for example, it's not going to reverse the arthritis, but it will certainly help manage the symptoms, and it will make your knees feel less vulnerable and maybe less susceptible to some of the pain and the discomfort. And lastly, another area would be osteoporosis. So we know that if you build muscle and you do strength training, that then correlates with your bone density as well. So that can obviously reduce risk of fractures and help in that area. So lots of different benefits there. Does anyone have any questions at this stage? No. Yeah, absolutely.
What one can especially do to keep balance, not lose balance.
Do you know, it's interesting, my next slide is balance. Very good. You're ahead of me. You should be up here. No, I didn't have anything about balance in there initially, and then people were asking about it, and it is a really important area. So I don't do loads of balance exercise with my clients. The only reason being is that I think it's something they can generally do on their own. It doesn't necessarily require my professional input because it's really simple exercises. It's standing on one leg, as we know, and was it Michael Mosley that said, do that while you're brushing your teeth? So that's, I don't know if I'd be able to do that. They say men can't multitask, but I haven't tried. But standing on one leg, and the other is kind of challenging your balance through dynamic movements. You do one foot in front of the other like this. You can also, if you can't stand on one leg yet, the kind of scaled down version of that is just do a staggered stance like this and hold like that, and then eventually you'd be able to stand on one leg. But it's very basic exercises, and there's only about 2 or 3 that you'd need to be doing. And so I often say to my clients, do that at your own time as homework, and then we'll do more of the strength exercise when I'm with them. But there are other areas, loads of other areas, that influence our balance as well. So one of those, as I described earlier, is posture. So if we can improve our posture, then our centre of mass is obviously in the right place, so we're less likely to topple over. Whereas if any kind of postural deviation, as I say, it's moving our centre of mass, we're more likely to fall in any which direction. So if you're forward slightly, even a little bit, you're much more likely to fall forwards. So posture is another area that helps with balance. And also your strength through your core muscles. So your core is kind of functions to stabilize the rest of your body. So your kind of arms and legs can move because you've got this foundation of stability in your core. So core exercises and leg exercise as well, because you're stood on your legs. So the stronger they are, the more stable you'll be as well, and the more control you'll have. So those are a few things that can help with balance. And then it's also other things that can help with fall prevention. So actually thinking about your environment, not having things that you can trip over, that sort of thing. One common way that people trip is on their toes. And that can be because the muscles in the front of our legs weaken. So there's muscles through the shin area that are responsible for lifting the toes. So if they start to weaken or atrophy, as we say, with the other muscles, then we can end up catching our toe. So there's an exercise that you can do, lifting your toes up and holding and down again. You can add that in your routine that we did earlier. And of course you do that all, while you're watching the TV, that sort of thing. So I thought I'd do a couple of exercise demonstrations, and we can all have a go at them and see how we go. So I'm just going to get my chair. So the first exercise we'll do will be a leg extension, and this is to work mainly your quad muscles, which cross your knee and will help to support your knees, which, as we know, can be quite a vulnerable area. So this is very useful, and again, you can do it in front of the TV. So if you sit right back in the chair like this, we'll then stretch forwards and hold a second and all the way back. So you remember earlier when I said about holding a couple of seconds? So you can add that in here, which means that you'll just benefit even more from the exercise. And you'll notice when you stop there, it becomes more difficult and you might find it's a bit shaky. So that's a good way to make the exercise more challenging. And if you pop your hand just above the knee, you'll actually physically feel the muscle contracting and squeezing as well. So that will help you build up what we call mind-muscle connection. So you're mentally connecting with your body a little bit more, becoming more in tune, essentially. Could you all feel that working? Okay, super. So these are a couple of exercises that I think are particularly important. So that's one that you ought to take away with you. And the next one, I'm going to do one more. This will be for your back, and this relates to what I mentioned earlier about posture. So this will help with the sort of the rounded shoulders and just bringing you a little bit more upright, targeting your upper back. So I'll demonstrate first, and then you can have a go. So I'm going to sit up tall. I'm sat about halfway along the chair. I'm hinging from the hips, keeping the back straight, and then I'll lift the arms up and down as if I'm rowing. So you're keeping your weight forward, you're lifting your elbows towards the ceiling. So imagine there's a bit of thread attached to your elbows and they're being pulled up to the ceiling. And then you can think about squeezing your shoulder blades together. And then as you go down, stretching the back, letting your shoulders drop forward and getting a stretch. So if you keep your weight forward, you should start to feel that through the upper back and behind your shoulders. Can any of you feel that working? Yeah, okay, that's super. I think with that, you can rest there, by the way. So that one I think is actually good to do without any weight initially, because you can feel the muscles that are meant to be working. Whereas if you went straight into doing that with dumbbells, you'd probably naturally take a lot of the load through your arms, because it feels more natural and you're more comfortable maybe using your arm muscles. So that's good. That will help keep us a little bit more upright. And of course you can do that with the stretchy bands. You just pop it under your feet and you can pull the stretchy band. If you do have a band as well, you don't actually have to do a bent over row. The reason you hinge forwards is because if you've got weights, then you're pulling against gravity then. Whereas if you've got the band, you could be sat down and have the band in front like this, and then you can row. So then you can stay upright if you prefer. And you can just loop the band around your banister or around your foot, or get your partner to hold the band. Okay. So the next bit is just to say that we have maybe more control over our health than we think we do. And I mean, I don't have much life experience, but my experience comes from working with clients, I suppose, and having those kind of first-hand case studies of seeing people really improve and become much fitter and much healthier in quite short periods of time as well, and with not as much input as you'd imagine. So particularly, like I said earlier, if you're starting from scratch, if you do 20 minutes a day, which is not loads, that's going to yield a huge benefit, because 20 minutes compared to 0 minutes is a huge difference. And it's particularly true for beginners, as I say. And one thing I like to remember as well is that you will 100% improve in all these different areas, regardless of age. So I heard on a podcast at one point, which makes sense, it might be obvious, but it sort of resonated for me. It said the hallmark of any living organism is adaptation. So we adapt to the demands that are placed on our body in the same way that anything else in the world that's living does. And so when a client comes to me and says, oh, if I do these exercises, will I actually get stronger? The answer is 110% you will. Maybe not at the same rate as if you were younger, because you've got less growth hormone and all these other variables. But if you're doing no exercise at all and suddenly you're doing weights every evening for 10 minutes, then your body will at some point go, oh, that's different. And you will adapt to that and change and become stronger in that case. And the same applies for cardiovascular health, flexibility, and everything else. So I'm going to go on to the last bit, because I think I may be at the end of my time. This is all about how to fit it into your day. So this is the fun bit, because I've given you lots of information, lots of different principles, and a couple of exercises to try as well. So you've got the knowledge, but you need to apply it to your lives, and that's where people trip up, because they don't necessarily have the motivation. They know what they ought to do, but they'd rather have a biscuit and a cup of tea. So these things can help. So we need to build habits, essentially, and we need to remove the possibility of forgetting. And sometimes we forget on purpose. But if you create tighter parameters around when you're doing your fitness, your 5-minute workout, then it's harder to avoid. So if you do it in between 2 existing habits, so that might be after you've brushed your teeth, before breakfast, and those are things that are very established that aren't going anywhere, and you put it right in the middle, it's much harder to then avoid it, because you know exactly when you're meant to do the exercise. And you can also be specific about how long is that going to last, what type of exercise are you doing, and every other possible factor. So you know exactly what's meant to happen in that 5-minute slot, essentially. And you can plan that all ahead of time. So that helps. I've had a client who used to have 2 coffees every morning, which I don't know if I'd recommend that necessarily, but he did the exercise between the coffees, and all of a sudden he was like doing it every day, from previously me having to kind of really push and encourage him. So it just sort of clicked, just from kind of building the right habits that just seemed to work for him. I don't know if that was partly because he was incentivized by the second coffee, and so you can implement that as well. That kind of taps into the reward system of the brain, and lots of us are more childlike than we think, and if you know that, oh, if I do this I can have a cup of tea, you might do it. So that's an example of where that kind of worked. But some of us are just unlikely to do a structured, kind of pre-planned, even 5 minutes of exercise every day, particularly at the beginning. So you might need to ease yourself in, but luckily I've got one more tip, so there's still hope. And this is to do tiny, tiny bits of exercise that you kind of intersperse across the day, and that might build up to being 5 minutes in total. So that's things like, before you get out of bed, you could do leg raises on your bed, or lifting the arms. And these are the types of kind of slightly odd habits that people do actually end up building into their lives. And people tell me, oh, I do 10 arm lifts every day before I get out of bed, and that just becomes something they do. So you can really build these things into your life. And if you do 20 other similar habits, then you're doing 5 or 10 minutes across the day, because it all compounds. And that's just as beneficial, in my opinion, as doing 5 minutes all at once. So a few other examples, just to get your creative brain flowing. You can do, if you've got stairs, every time you go up, you could do 10 step-ups on the bottom step and then go up. So that's something that would take you maybe 20 seconds. You could do certain exercises every time you go through a particular doorway. You can kind of leave little bits of equipment around that you kind of lift and do a few, and then carry on. You can also, as I said earlier, do things in front of the TV is really easy, or any other kind of period where you're kind of waiting for something, like waiting for the kettle to boil and you do your lifts, or you're waiting for the oven to heat up and you do your high knees. You can encourage your family as well. I do have clients that do this in kind of public spaces where there's a kind of void of time, where they're waiting for the bus or they're waiting for the dentist. But I've heard anecdotally that you can end up leading a class in your local dentist waiting room. So it depends how up you are for that. But those are my ideas for fitting it into your day. Now I'll summarise with the key bits. So number one is we have more control than we think, generally speaking, over our health and fitness. So that's positive. Any exercise is better than none. So don't be sort of, what's the word? Don't put certain exercise above others, or pedestalize, going to the gym. Because if you, for example, go for a walk with your dog in the park, that's yielding the same benefit as walking on a treadmill. It's just that one of those is in an environment where you've paid £20 or whatever, and one of them is in the park in a more casual basis, but they're the same thing. So any exercise is better than none. So pick something that you enjoy, that suits your personality, and that you think you can do sustainably, ideally forever. And next is full circle. It's never too late to start. So it's a good time to invest in our future and start some exercise, hopefully. And if you have any questions, then go ahead.
And how does that affect things like your blood pressure?
Exercise?
Yeah.
Well, you're in the short term, when you're exercising, your blood pressure goes up, but in the long term, your resting blood pressure should come down. It's one of the health benefits of consistent exercise. Yeah?
You've not mentioned hydration.
That was good timing. Yeah, well, the hydration is very important. I mean, there's so many things that I probably haven't managed to fit into my talk that are really important. I think as we get older, our sense of thirst actually decreases, which some of us might know, some of us might not. I see it with my parents, that they're not drinking as much as they used to, and they actually have to be reminded, whereas I naturally drink a lot without having to think about it. So that is very important. It's obviously important for every area of our health. So yeah, if you can get in approximately 2 litres a day, then that's a good idea. And it's important, I would say, kind of standardise the basics before you're trying to do anything else. So start with sleep, water, good diet, and general movement. Okay, any more? You'll have to do a good, strong hand so I can see. Yes.
I feel very encouraged that just a few minutes will make a difference, and I haven't got to, kill myself for an hour and then lie down.
Yes. Well, that's good. I mean, that's kind of part of my message is that actually the amount of investment you need to put in for quite significant benefit is actually not as big as you think. So, for example, with the strength exercise, that's something you'd want to do 3 times a week. That's what the NHS suggests. That's what I would suggest as well. So to get, I'd say, 80% of the benefit from strength exercise, you'd train 3 times a week. And if you were to do more than that, it would be very much diminishing returns. You'd be gaining a little bit more, but not much. So, and the same with the balance, about 2 or 3 times a week, and then doing kind of general movement every day as well alongside that. But essentially you're talking a few hours a week in total. Yes?
I have problems remembering all the things you're supposed to be doing.
Do you say to remember all the things you're meant to do? That's a good point, and maybe something I'll think about. Do you mean in terms of diet, hydration, everything?
The exercises.
Oh, the exercise. Oh, you're brilliant. You've sold my book for me. I'll come back to that. But I'll come back to that in a moment. And sorry, you said.
I've been doing a balance clinic in the past 3 months and do most of the exercises which you described.
Yeah.
I find that now I'm really exhausted at the end of a session. Is that going to improve, do you think?
I mean, you don't want to be overly fatigued at the end of the class. You have to find a balance, essentially, because if you do lots and lots of exercise, then at a point above a certain threshold, you'll be doing too much, and that might be kind of counterproductive. If you're going to a group class, of course, that's not a tailored thing for you specifically. That's more general because it's a group with people with different abilities. And so you have to take that into account. And if that means that you leave the class early or you stop for a 5-minute break in the middle, then you have to kind of try and override any social awkwardness that you might have about that and speak to the instructor and say, well, actually, I need a little break in the middle, or actually, I can't do these particular exercises because of, whatever ailment you might have. And so if you're doing the class with everyone and you're getting to the end and you're completely knackered and then going into hibernation, then it might be slightly too much for you as an individual, in which case still go there because all your friends are there and it's enjoyable, but stop 10 minutes sooner and have a glass of water. Yeah, let's do one more, absolutely.
I have great difficulty putting my socks on. My trousers on. I have to lean against something to get the legs in, otherwise I fall over.
Right.
Specific.
That's normally a flexibility issue when those types of tasks become difficult. Often that's it's stiffness in your glute muscles, so you basically need to stretch a little bit. So what you can do, if you're lying on an easy one, when you're lying on your back on your bed, you can kind of pull your knee in towards you and that will stretch the glute muscle. And that might make it easier when you're trying to lean forward and put your socks on. But yeah, that's stiffness basically, so that'd be stretching. And I'll quickly say, sorry if it's okay, coming back to the question here, I do have a book with all the exercises in, and you're welcome to come and have a look at it. And it's got pictures of my clients doing the exercise, you can obviously see, and then descriptions of how to execute it and the benefits as well. So you're welcome to come and have a look at that.
Okay, Helen, there might be horrible feedback now. I'm so sorry about that. That was fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
And it was a bit fun too, wasn't it, at the end of the AGM. So I think I might have paused for this gentleman's hand.
Thank you.